As I said, the UNDP is the co-organiser of the event. With that in mind, first question, what's been the most encouraging thing you've heard today?
Very simple, that we are here. And very simple that we are actually hearing about a private sector that is an integral part of achieving the SDGs. And I will not go into trying to wrap up all the discussions that has happened that Malcolm has just mentioned. But I think 2 or 3 things that are so important in this. The first one is to see the examples of private sector, a dynamism of the initiatives and the resources they put behind this change agenda. Because at the end of the day, what are we talking about? We are talking about a transformation. The SDG is about transformation. It is not business as usual. But we also hear a private sector that no longer talks about this in terms of charity and CSR. They talk about this from a business perspective. Being echoed by governments, we heard Minister Wong talk about the synergy and the centrality of the private sector in achieving the development goals of this country and by extension to others. We also have seen a UN Secretary General express that the private sector is a central change agent in this process. I just want to remind those of you who are not as old as I am that only in 1998 did the then US Secretary General Kofi Annan have the courage to bring in the private sector as an integral part of the UN through the introduction of the Global Compact. It is less than 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. We have come a long way, and I think that that is the most important part of what I've heard today. And one last point on that we hear again that the development discourse is being turned into, yes, it is possible, to paraphrase Erik Solheim in his lunch speech.
Yeah. Brilliant. So, very encouraging to see so many private sector and private sector engagement and a change of attitude of the private sector. As I said at the beginning, over 60% of the participants here are private sector, which is phenomenal. But did you find any challenges? Did you think you heard any challenges that still need addressing?
If we believe that transformation is easy, then we are barking up the wrong tree. The big challenge in this room and outside is obviously how do you turn discourse into action? Mm-hmm. And not only in terms of results, in terms of localization, because you need to localize the agenda, as we've heard from so many. Also, how do we ensure that the voice of those that are normally not heard be heard and be part of this process? There is a transformational agenda in this, which is called equality, and we should not forget that. But behind that, there are 2 words that I think are absolutely crucial. And there are challenges. Yes, there are challenges. One is trust. Mm-hmm. And we've heard that from so many of these working groups and panels. And the other one is leadership. Leadership that is not only confined to the political leaders, but decidedly to the political leaders, but also leadership in the private sector. This transformation and this drive does not happen if it doesn't come from the top of these enterprises. And the last word in that is urgency. Those of us who introduced the concept of the Millennium Development Goals some 15 years back have to realize, looking back, that it took 4 to 5 years because we actually know where we were going. And we cannot afford to repeat that experience this time. So discourse into action is, for me, the big issue.
Yeah. Urgency and trust,
yeah.
Critical.
Yeah.
Okay, and one final question for you. In his opening remarks, Hao Liang talked about this new development era. It was referred to earlier in one of those discussions, the new development era in this region. From conversations today, do you think we're moving in that direction? And if you do, what does that mean for both the UN and the private sector?
Talking about new development era might be something that is more issues of some of the development partners like the UN, like the development organizations around the world. The issue is very clear. Official development assistance is no longer a driver of development in the majority of the countries what we used to call developing. The drivers in these countries are local resources, whether they come from budgets or they come from their own private sector, from revenues. And moving in that direction, which to me is a dream and the fulfillment of what I've done for 35 years, to get to that point. That means space for local ownership. That means space for that dialogue that we've heard here today, also with the private sector. It takes place also in sharing experiences laterally. Some call it South-South cooperation, but it takes many, many shapes. I think for the UN, it means that we have to look very, very much on our roles that we've been used to in the 20th century, and look at our roles as norm creators, as supporters of these localized processes, and in some cases still gap filling in terms of the development process. But I think we are moving in that way, in that direction, and I think we have heard so many examples just from the 11 goals that we by now have listened to, Malcolm. So I'm very optimistic on that point.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. So we end on an optimistic note. Thank you very much, Jakob.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.